This is a message to all my supporters of this podcast. I'm introducing a new supporters program. You can contribute a small amount as a one-off payment to show your love for this podcast. Thank you in advance for all your contributions. I just wanted to let you know before we start the podcast that I am doing an online podcast course, how to be able to create, get your guests, scale it and monetize it. So please do go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and go into the contact us bit. I'm looking for new people to be able to be a podcast creator and really to be able to develop their skills and knowledge into a podcast. So as I said, go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and sign up. Thanks.
This is the Absolute Business Mindset Podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. This podcast will help and support you with new ideas about business. These are my thoughts, ideas, and comments. Today, I have Ollie Philips, who has had a glittering career in rugby and in business. Hi, Ollie. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Mark. Very well. Thank you very much. I'm not enjoying these early dark nights, though, that now are hitting us, and that's not what it's all about.
Isn't it? It's October that you know that things are coming up the winter time. So before we go into your rugby career, you did a business degree at Durham. Why did you choose to do a business degree, and why Durham?
Well, truth be told, I was originally meant to be going to the to London School of Economics. Okay. I was at a school called Brighton College down the south coast, and I was predicted 2 A's and a B in my A-levels, and I discovered the magic of rugby and girls at 16. So that sort of quickly put paid, unfortunately, to those 2 A's and a B. And I came away with BBD. And I think the London School of Economics is sort of like, we would like to accept you, but we're not going to. And then my second choice was Durham. But I'd never really thought it was going to happen. I thought it was going to be in London. I was playing for Harlequins at the time. So I thought that's where I was going to end up. And fortuitously, Durham said, look, actually, we still would like you to come. And so I went up to the northeast. I thought it was actually probably a good move for me to be in a collegiate environment away from, if you like, the distraction of London, et cetera, to go and be a quality sort of red brick university and make sure that I went and at least came away with a good degree because of the fact that my A-levels were not where I thought they would be. So I really needed to make sure that I made amends and went and got a decent, first or 2-1 from a top class university. And so Durham was the place for me to go, both professionally and personally, if you like, just for a bit of an emotional break, psychological break, and also to refocus and make sure I got my 2-1
good
at the minimum.
And why a business degree?
You know what? I just think it was just probably the thing to do, just in vogue, if you like. At 18, I didn't really know what I wanted to do except for chase an egg around a rugby field. Right? I knew that I loved doing that, but I wasn't sure where my career would go, what I would do professionally. I didn't even know if rugby would work, so I didn't want to put all my eggs into that one basket. And it's particularly as I then got BBD in my A-levels, it became even more relevant for me and pertinent that I got something behind me, because it could all go wrong at some point. And I just thought that at some point I'm going to have to go into the big bad world of business, so to speak, and the corporate world. And so why not go and do a BA in business at a great institution like Durham and just learn about all the areas of business.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump straight into the rugby because it's something I'm really passionate about. So you played for Gloucester, you played for Stade Francais, you played for Harlequins as well. But what was it like captaining England in the rugby sevens?
It was like a fulfillment of a dream, right? I mean, that's what you sort of aspire as as a less than 16-year-old, as a 13, 14-year-old kid, starting to play rugby, for your county and for your region and all this sort of stuff, it starts to get a little bit more serious at that point. And I just took so much joy and pleasure from playing with my friends or whatever that I always knew that this is what I wanted to do, kind of thing. In fact, that's a lie. I didn't always know, but I just loved it so much that any opportunity for me to keep playing was brilliant. And when the opportunity, someone said, "Look, actually, we'll pay you to play," I was like, "Wow, okay. Well, I mean, I don't want to tell you this, but I'd probably do it for free anyway. But great, thanks very much." Being a 20, 21-year-old student at the time, without anything, without living off my whatever it was, £1,000 a term in university, I was delighted that I could get an extra couple of £100 for playing rugby. And fortunately for me, England came knocking very, very early in my career. Like when I was 20, I was off to Dubai, and it's just that whole experience of playing with a rose on your chest, singing the national anthem before you go out to represent your own country is a very, very proud moment. Made even sweeter by the fact that with the Sevens, you obviously went and chased the sun around the world, and we were actually pretty good as well. So it also helped that we won a lot of the time, which made it even better.
Always helps, doesn't it? And how special was the Hong Kong Sevens?
Just on another level, right? So my first 2 years of being involved within the England squad, we went back to back in Hong Kong, which England have never done ever since. They've never done it before or post. So to be there, to be part of that squad, to be part of that group of players, going to Hong Kong, in a massive expat region that love their rugby, love England more than anything else in the world, and to win in front of circa 55,000 people. It's just, it's. I mean, Melrose is the home of Sevens where it's created, but Hong Kong's sort of, now the heart of Sevens, if you like. Yeah. And it was just a, special place, special time. With also within the context of, some of the most iconic players in the world were playing at that point in time as well. Lomu playing for New Zealand, Cullen playing for New Zealand, Serevi playing for Fiji, Runembaka playing for Fiji. Just all these greats. 2 years prior, I've been just salivating on telly, watching from my student digs. Suddenly here I was playing against them and winning as well, which is even better. And it's just still makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up every time I think about it.
That's awesome. And so it's interesting that you then went to Stade Francais in France and played 15s in France. How different was it transitioning to a different country? Same game, but slightly different emphasis. How was it doing that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing 15s all the way through. So the way it worked was you played 15s for your club. My club at that point in time was Newcastle Falcons. And then you got called up for England squad. And then the coach at the time was, Clive Woodward, and our Sevens coach was a guy called Mike Friday. But, you would basically get told that you're going off to play Sevens, you're going off to play Saxons, and you're going off to play, the All Blacks at Twickenham in 15s or whatever else. So I guess the transition into the game wasn't really that different, because every time I came back from a Sevens tour, I would be playing 15s anyway. Mm. The difference was the cultural side of it. I've been in Newcastle where, yes, okay, probably the only similarity to the French is they spoke with funny accents, but that aside, very stark contrast to Paris, right? Newcastle and Paris are two very, very different cities. Yeah. The Geordies do speak another language, but the French is very much a completely different language. So I think culturally it was very, very different. And then professionally it was. At that point in time, I think it's fair to say that in Newcastle we were not a big club. We'd have sort of 5 people and their dog turn up for a game, even though we had arguably one of the greatest players of all time playing for us in Johnny Wilkinson. But here I was with an opportunity to sign for a team that was at that point in time was the biggest in Europe. They were not shy of shouting about it. They played in pink. They had a gregarious gay owner. It was the flamboyant club of Europe, and they weren't just they packed a punch too, right? They weren't just sort of loud and brash. They were artistic, they were bright, they were colourful, but equally they were flamboyant, and they were effective. They were ruthless as a team. And I was, very fortunate that I got a chance to go and play for them for 3 years, which was an amazing experience for my rugby career, but also for my personal life. I look back at it now, and of course you remember the rugby, but the greatest thing and the best thing that comes away from it was actually the cultural experience, the friends that I made, the language that I learned. I learned French fluently, so I take that more as a bonus than the opportunity to play rugby.
And how was it learning the language? Because I see that you're an ambassador cactus language training. Did that come from your time in France, or is there another reason for that?
That sort of came afterwards, but I mean, it was because I wanted to champion everything about the benefits of learning a language, and if you like the added pluses that it gives you, the extra tools that it puts into your arsenal. If you can actually go into a country, a region, a city, learn the language, and then integrate more effectively within the local community, and that was definitely a differentiator for me. How hard was it to learn the language? I mean, it was tough, right? I mean, it's a Latin-based language, and I think for 6 months it was a slog. I absolutely worked my socks off, and I really didn't get very far with it. And I remember someone just saying to me, like, you'll know when you start to dream in French. And I can remember it to the day, December the 23rd. I'd been there since June. I went back to my family for Christmas or whatever else, and I put my head down that evening, and I just thought in French for some reason about what I was going to do the next day, or I need to brush my teeth or whatever. But I thought it in French, not in like English, and then translated it. And I suddenly was like, oh my God, like I get it. And from that point on, I just flew, kind of thing. I really learned fast, and I'm incredibly grateful for that, because that is definitely probably the best thing, the greatest skill, if you like, that came out of that experience.
Well, I could talk to you about rugby all evening, but I have a duty to talk about business.
It's a business. I mean, rugby is a business, and it's struggling right now. So we can talk all day long if you like.
You have done a varied, since retiring. You've had so before you retired, you were a brand ambassador for Jaguar Land Rover. You were also a global brand athlete for Adidas. I think it wasn't it? Was it Adidas?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was indeed. Yeah, Adidas.
So, how was it while being one of those sort of brand ambassadors? Was there duties that you had to turn up to and sort of speak at and sort of be present for adverts and things like that? What was the sort of the business side of sport at that stage?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was as it is now. If you like, there were sponsorship opportunities. You had a brand that was attractive to certain institutions or certain brands in itself, and as long as, I guess, your values and your principles correlated with that of that particular brand or that particular mark, it worked. Mine, Land Rover, Jaguar Land Rover, traditionally a British-based business, not necessarily now, but originally, and they were trying to crack the French markets. So a great opportunity for an Englishman that's integrated very well into France, can speak the language, playing for the biggest club in Europe, etc., etc. It was a good fit for their market. Now Adidas, I'd always been a huge fan of their boots and their apparel, and I won the award for the best player in the world in 2009. That was kind of I'd been an ambassador or an athlete for 2 years prior, but that was the one where they sort of like, okay, actually, you're going to be a global athlete now for us. It coincided again with me signing for Stad, who were sponsored by Adidas, big global brand, playing in pink. So it was just, if you like, it's all about timing, right? It's a lot of these things, and the timing for me was great with all these sorts of brands. And so you make hay while the sun shines. Right now, I'm no longer with. I don't play anymore, so those brands are no longer interested anymore, right? So just as you can quickly get in favour and quickly get out of favour pretty quickly.
You don't have to tell me numbers. Well, you can tell me numbers if you want, but what was the difference between a lucrative sponsorship deal versus your salary for Stade Francais or for any other Premiership team. I don't have a clue. So I'm just interested. Like, are you sort of talking that one is half of the other, or are they similar?
No, I mean, every single negotiation is different, right? So it's a case by case basis, and it depends on the value of the athlete and to the brand, and the rationale and the reasons as to why that athlete's attractive to them, and et cetera, et cetera. In my case, they were miles away, absolutely miles away in terms of, that doesn't mean I was earning astronomical money at Stade, but they were just, the deals were not lucrative in terms of financial, but, there was a bit, but it was more a bit of, contra and value in kind, and for Land Rover, you get a Land Rover or whatever else and all that sort of stuff. Adidas, you had the, if you like, there was some of the sort of hidden benefits of, there was a huge Adidas shop on the Champs-Elysees that I could walk in at any time with any of my family and get them out in whatever I wanted, so whilst money is important, there are experiences that money really can't buy. I mean, that could buy it, right? But it would take away the value, right? It's I don't know. There's the experience of walking in and being treated as like an ambassador and a guest and whatever in a place and being given it for nothing, as opposed to walking in and paying for it. Whilst the outcome is still very the same, right? You still get the same amount of kit and just two very different experiences. And I loved that. I really appreciated that element of it all. So, I mean, and bear in mind, this was in 2010, 11. The game, well, pre-COVID, the game has moved on enormously in terms of that. And now lots of the sponsorship arrangements have really accelerated. I think the World Cup being in England in 2015 changed the dynamic a little bit, particularly from the UK perspective in terms of where rugby players sat and everything else. Yeah. But the sport now is really struggling, right? I mean, the COVID has decimated a lot of the clubs and the finances or whatever. So all that progress that has been made, I would argue that even the game has now regressed to maybe where it was when I was playing, and at that point, and maybe even before, just because of the finances and the amount that the clubs and countries have suffered as a result of that.
And where do you think sort of rugby now goes when it comes to rebuilding? Is it in infrastructure? Is it by the aim to get the fans back into the stadiums as quickly as possible, or is it through television? How do you think rugby rebuilds itself? Let's just say in England rather than elsewhere.
Well, I think it's the greatest asset that rugby's ever had, right? Is the community. Okay, it's which encompasses the fans. The reason why so many people love rugby is just because of that. It feels like a family the whole time, right? Even though it's a huge global sport and spectacle, it still feels like you're part of this really tight knit family community, and that's what's missing from it at the moment. I don't know if you saw games on the weekend, but you had like iconic players that have played a long, long time, and Chris Robshaw and Richard Wigglesworth or Brad Barrett in particular, two players that are retiring in front of empty stadia, right? No one there to actually sort of thank them for all their service, and that's what's missing. That the fans being there, the local mini rugby happening on a Sunday, all these kids that are not actively participating and taking part in the sport, and that's absolutely critical for the game to get back on its feet. Sure, the TV money would be more, but TV, they can still play with TV now, right? They just no fans, but it's not the same spectacle. And what we might see in the next couple of weeks, Exeter, for example, their just incredible story as a club that came from nothing. Not from nothing, but a championship side to winning the Premiership, and now they play in 2 weeks for the opportunity to win Europe, be champions of Europe. Yeah. Now, that is an incredible success story for them, and they're going to do it in front of no fans potentially, right? That's tragic for that region of the UK, for that rugby club, for their fans, that community. So that is what needs to happen, and then infrastructure, everything else like that. I think they can worry about later. The biggest, if you want to ask about from a business side of it, for me, and some people will definitely disagree with this, but for me, the biggest opportunity has already been missed, because COVID, for all the negatives that it had, it could have forced the clubs into effectively aligning all of their calendars, right? They wanted to bring a global calendar into play whereby all the teams in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa were playing at the same time, and their season was correlated with all the what's going on within the UK and France and everywhere else like that.
Yeah.
And what that would have meant would have the possibility of a global league, a world super league in terms of clubs and also countries that could go on year after year after year. They haven't been able to get around the table and actually thrash it out and make that happen.
Yeah.
And what rugby's greatest strength originally is now its greatest weakness in that it's so fragmented as a sport. You've got, if you look at, you're asking where does the revenue come from? It comes from fans and it comes from TV, right? It comes from media. And right now, if you're a media buyer, rugby's not an attractive proposition, because you have to, if you want to own rugby per se, you have to have discussions with just so many parties. If you want the Premiership, you have to speak to Premier Rugby. If you want Pro 14 for for Wales, Ireland, Scotland, you need to speak to the Pro 14. If you want French rugby, you need to the top 14. Then if you want European rugby, you've got to speak to Champions Cup. If you want the local derby, you've got to speak back to the RFU, right? So you've got 5 already. Then you go to, I need international rugby. Well, you need to speak to Six Nations for that. You need to speak to Autumn Internationals for another product. Yeah. You need to speak to SANZAR for the championship. It's just relentless, right? You already got 8, 9 different parties. As an investor, as a rights holder, that is not attractive, right? You want to go to one person, one organization, and be like, let me buy it all. Here's a massive check, and away you go. And they've missed that opportunity.
That's really interesting, because I think I don't think my audience would really have thought about rugby being so fragmented and so many different interested stakeholders in there. So,
that's that. Sorry, to round that off, that's what I think and I hope CVC are doing at this present moment in time. That you're seeing this incredibly powerful and well-funded private equity house, VC fund, whatever, start to move into rugby, and it's starting to own minority stakes, between 28 and 30% in the Premiership. They're trying to get in the Six Nations and the Pro 14. They're trying to do the top 14. So once they own the whole lot, then they can start to negotiate around amalgamating and bringing the whole thing together.
But the only thing I've seen CVC do similar things with other sports and maybe turned it around, but they're a private equity house. They don't hold on to things long term, do they? They would be looking to market it to increase revenues, increase profitability, ready to be able to sell it in 10 years' time.
Yeah, but I think, that's true, right? That's good commercial sense, that's good business. But if they do that, they've created a much more valuable product, right? So that is more aligned, is more valuable, has more, greater productivity, increased revenues, as you say, greater profitability. All that messaging for me is pretty positive for the game. And I think will only propel it to another level. I think if what you're seeing now is because of the way that it's fragmented, everybody's fighting for themselves, right? You've got everyone just trying to fight and stay above water, and there isn't a united sort of decision-making process, and that's hurting the game. But, that's just my opinion. You can speak to somebody else and they'll shoot me down in flames. But
there's still a huge fraternity who want English rugby to stay predominantly based around England, because the derbies for them are the most important things. Sort of Bath versus Bristol is more important to them sometimes than even European rugby.
Yeah, but amalgamating the product doesn't change the Gloucester and Bath derby is not going to go away. It'll still be happening. If anything, it's become even more valuable as a product, right? Because those rivalries are what will drive the value of the product. But you get you just get certain individuals that are very sort of single-mindedly focused on what's really important just for them, rather than what's important for the game. And I think if it's going to grow as a game, as a product, and it's an incredible product, it needs to adapt and mold a bit. And that still might happen because of COVID, right? But there was a huge opportunity missed in amalgamating the calendars.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an interesting point. So you've been a commentator for Sky and Eurosport. How does it feel turning up on match day for your favourite club or for England? And how does it feel actually just turning up and talking about rugby rather than actually being on the pitch playing?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match your disease with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
Well, I walk away a lot less sore, that's for definite. Apart from that, that's probably the only bonus from it. I think now, at 38, those ghosts have gone now, if that makes sense. You start to realize and rationalize around, like, my body's just not capable of doing the things it used to be doing. But in saying that, the transition, well, I just found I didn't find very easy at all. There are certain players that are fine with it, and they're ready to rock and roll, and they're ready to leave. Because my career was ended slightly prematurely through injury at 29. I felt I still had something left to give to the sport. So certainly for I don't know, 3 or 4 years, I was watching in envy and jealousy, if you like, of what was still going on, hoping and aspiring that I could maybe get back to playing that. And that was something it took me a bit of time to manage and get through and everything else like that. But yeah, I mean, now I'm a fan again now, which is what I love. I've got 2 young daughters that I can't wait to take to watch rugby. And I've definitely, now I look at it and I enjoy my rugby again. Whereas I think I used to look at it frustrated and disappointed that I couldn't still be there.
How was that from a mental health point of view? Was there was like, I don't want to label anybody or anything, but would you say that you were depressed, or were you just envious and frustrated?
No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think the we're very, very good at talking around physical health, right? It's important to be physically well and look physically fit or feel physically fit and all the rest of it. We don't talk around being mentally fit, mentally healthy. For some reason, I don't know why, but that's kind of taboo. Although that's definitely sort of those barriers are being broken down a little bit now, which is awesome to see in society. But from my personal perspective, 100%, I was in a pretty dark place for I would say 3 to 6 months. That took I needed some help to transition through that. And fortunately for me, through our players' union, which is called the RPA, I was able to get that help through a company called Cognacity, and saw a therapist or counselor, whatever you want to call them. But and they helped. They helped me manage through this muddle and mess that I had in my brain and the emotions that I was feeling. Right, and I'm a huge advocate of feelings drive emotions, emotions drive behaviors, and a lot of my feelings and emotions were fairly negative and built around frustration and anxiety and and feeling a bit disillusioned, right? And as a result of that, a lot of my behavior and decision making was being compromised due to that and was fairly negative. And so I'm incredibly thankful that those people were there at that point in time to help me, because some other people are not fortunate enough to have that. And that is probably a period in my life that was incredibly pivotal and important to me in terms of my transition away from sport into what I do now.
And I suppose family, you say you've got 2 girls, a wife. So were they supportive? Have they helped you? Because I found through experiences that I've had with mental health that my family and my kids are a great stabilizer. They're great stability for me. And even though things might be going well or might go not so well, you've always got that stability at home that for me is a great benefit.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, they weren't around at that point in time. I look at it as fortunately that they weren't a part of my life at that point, because to be honest with you, I don't think I was probably mentally or emotionally mature enough to manage that. I probably would have cocked that up. I definitely would have. I was too sort of self-centered and too probably egotistical and narcissistic at that point of still thinking that it was all about me and my focus and needing sort of recognition and adulation and whatever else like that. So it probably would have gone the wrong way. So I'm just thankful that, my wife came into my life. She actually came into my life in the middle of that process. I think, and she quickly realized, actually, this bloke's a toe is in a bit of a mess here. I'm just going to step away for a bit. Otherwise it's going to get out of hand. And then was she is an incredible human being, was then gracious enough to meet me again later on when I sort of matured a bit, if you like, and figured things out. And then our kids came pretty quickly after that, and as you say, now, don't get me wrong, there are days where they could drive me to my grave, and and a different kind of depression. They are equally, the thing that inspires me and gets me up every day, and if you like, keeps focus and a certain perspective on life. And with or without kids, I'm not saying people who feel who've got mental health issues go and have a couple of kids, and that's definitely not the recommendation, right? But you find things in your life that give you gratitude and focus, and they are definitely my wife and my 2 kids.
We're coming towards the end, but one question: do you have a morning routine?
I do in the fact that I still, because of obviously my playing career, whatever else, exercise is still a pivotal part for me, right? I need that, whatever you want to call it, endorphin that comes from exercise just to kickstart my day and focus my mind. And so I need that. It's almost like a drug, if that makes sense. Now my body is not capable of doing the things it used to be able to do, and my knees definitely don't agree with me still wanting to do so much exercise, but that is an absolute must for me. So, and because of kids, it seems to be getting earlier and earlier, but I'll always try and do an hour every day in the morning, which is normally around 6:30, to kickstart my day. Even if I drag myself through it and it's probably the worst session ever, I always feel better at the end of it, and that seems to set me up for the rest of my day and whatever I need to tackle. Whereas if I don't do it, I quickly feel just a bit useless and a bit flat and whatever else. And I can manage that for 1 or 2 days, but I definitely then need that. So that would be my one, if you like, non-negotiable routine that I always do, or at least try to do at least 4 times a week, 5 times a week, if I can get it in there. Yeah. So that would be my routine. And then I would love to say that there is more, and there probably are more structures that I'd love to put in place, but a 2-year-old and an 8-month-old,
that's tough.
Quickly put pay to any of those plans. So I sort of relish that. And I used to get frustrated. Now I just relish and enjoy the disruption and where's this morning taking me before I've actually got to go and do some work.
Yeah, once they get to 4 or 5, once they get to school, I'm not saying it gets any easier. It just gets a little bit different, and it's slightly different focus, which isn't so demanding as having a toddler.
Right, okay. Well, I'll just keep punching out then, Ollie. That's the message. Keep
just
punching.
A few more years. You got to wait.
Just keep on trucking.
Yeah. Right, Ollie, I'm going to bring it to a close now, because I know you've got another call that you've got to do this evening. I have not covered any of the more career after your rugby career, and so there's still a lot to talk about. Your different businesses, different speaking events. You're writing in a London newspaper. There is a lot to still talk about. Your role at a Big Four.
PwC, yeah.
So I would love to have you on again. Let's
My
try and
pleasure.
get something in the next month or so. I'll speak to your secretary, but we'll try and get a second episode in, and that will be more targeted towards your career post rugby. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Yeah, well, I mean, that's probably a good sort of segue, if you like. We talked about rugby, where the business of rugby is, and then my transition out of it, and then we've called time, and then it'll be a great segue into the next one.
All right, lovely, Ollie. Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers, Mark. Pleasure.
All right.